Planetary Calendars, Astro Portraits. I'm Lahni DeAmicis, one of the astrologers. The person we're looking at today is very famous. Fred Rogers, aka Mr. Rogers, aka Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, who was on television for many years and was a tremendously sophisticated thinker about how we should treat children and how children experience the world. And people oftentimes underestimate how important he was among the thinkers of the day in changing how we raise children. Up until that point, there was a tendency to treat children kind of like little, nebulous animals, and those early parts of life didn't really matter. It was later on that they were shaped, and Fred Rogers and other people like him realized, no, those early years are primary. And of course, research since then has shown that we learn a tremendous amount of what we're going to know in our entire lives in those first 3 or 4 years. Who is he? What's his chart about? This is an interesting chart astrologically because he has what's called a stellium, a collection of planets in the same sign in Pisces, the sign of the spiritual, the sign of the sensitive, the sign of the deep thinker. He has Mercury, Venus, the asteroid Vesta, that was actually a fifth one, the moon and the sun in Pisces. What's interesting is the Mercury and the Venus in Pisces are conjunct, same degree. The Vesta is 1 degree away at 3. Vesta, close to a planet, gives that planet a strong sense of mission. Venus in Pisces is what's called the exalted position. It is a tremendously compassionate position that relates tremendously well to others, especially to people in a Jupiter style. Remember that Pisces is ruled by Jupiter. It's the feminine side of Jupiter. So that Venus place there is very powerful. The fact that the Vesta is there, this was a mission to him. Expressing compassion, especially through speech. And remember, Pisces is also illusion. Through make-believe, through puppets, was for him a mission. We know his rising. He was actually born March 20th, 1928 at 8:20 a.m. in Latrobe, Pennsylvania, famous, of course, for its beer. At the 29th degree in 41 minutes of Pisces, the very last degree. People oftentimes say, oh, well, all the energy is going into the next sign. Actually, from what we've seen over the years, and other astrologers have seen, when you're in the last degree of a sign, it makes it more powerful. It's like you're standing on the threshold, and all the energy is right there. It's all inside the person. And so this is like a super Pisces energy. What's interesting is that right outside of that, at 3 degrees Aries, is Uranus. So Uranus is very close to the sun in Aries, a very, very energetic sign, which is also the sign of his Jupiter. His Jupiter is at 12 degrees Aries. Jupiter in Aries is a sign that loves to be with people. It likes to engage people. It's kind of fearless about that. It likes to be with people, it likes to engage, it likes to be the first person in the room. And this is part of his quality. Jupiter in Aries also tends to like children. It likes understanding that new life. It tends to be fascinated with babies and young children. And Uranus conjunct the sun is one of the reasons why he dealt so well with technology. Uranus is all about technology. He has Taurus rising. Taurus rising, among other things, gives a very nice voice. And his voice was so mellow and so gentle. It's Venus ruled, which means it went back to that exalted Venus in Pisces. So you see this beautiful connection between the artistry of Taurus rising. Remember, he was a musician and a singer and a tremendous piano player. Played classical music. Very, very talented person, very well trained. Very talented in his voice. It was part of his work as a puppeteer. His rising goes back to that Venus and Mercury in Pisces now, and it's supercharged by the Jupiter and the Uranus in Aries. So he brings a lot of energy to this. And what's beautiful about this is that the Jupiter and the Uranus are in the 12th house along with the part of fortune. The 12th house is the sign of the studio. It's oftentimes seen as a sign of the hospital or sickness or prison because it's restricted. That's one way to look at it, I guess, in a fairly difficult part of life. But it's also the studio. It's the haven. And he liked being on the studio floor. He liked being in that protected environment, and having a son in the 11th house, he liked the expansiveness of it, the technology, and also being in the 11th house, it shows an ability to reach out to a large audience. And it's funny because these several houses, the 11th house, the 12th house, the first house, that's really where so much of his chart takes place. Interestingly, he has Mars highly elevated in Aquarius, once again, technology, Mars in Aquarius, conjunct Ceres, the largest of the asteroids, in the shepherd. And in some ways, he was like that shepherd. He was the shepherd of the community. He did so many things that really affect his community. They many times credit him with saving the financing for PBS. His presentation on the congressional floor saved it because of how important this was. He expressed how important this was. He was the shepherd. He had the midheaven in Capricorn, with Pallas up at the highly elevated as well. Pallas has technical skills in Aquarius. He understood how to use technology well. The beautiful part of this chart is that stellium in Pisces, because it shows his compassion. It shows his sensitivity. It shows his sense of mission through that Vesta, that this mattered to him. Well, he was on the air, I think, for 38 years. You don't do that without a strong sense of mission. I mean, putting on that sweater every day and changing those shoes every day. He did very similar shows. But he worked with so many children and so many children in distress, and he was so accessible to people. That Jupiter in Aries, that Uranus and Aries in the 12th house, it shows the energy he brought to it. It also shows that when he was in the studio, he was a force to be reckoned with. And they always said that when he was working in the studio with his team, he would run things. I mean, they've kind of had to follow him around because he was a little bit impetuous. People would walk in the studio, he'd drop everything to walk over to them, practically in the middle of a scene. Our children would come and he'd stop everything to go tend to them. It mattered to him. But it all came through this beautiful filter of this Taurus rising, that beautiful voice, this love of music, this calm nature that he expressed, a tremendous amount of spirituality, a great love of people, expressed gracefully through that Taurus rising. So that, Fred Rogers. So, thanks for joining us. Come back and see our forecast on Fridays. We typically put up portrait on Tuesdays. You can find us at planetarycalendar.com. Don't forget to get your calendars and your day planners because you want to know what's going on. And be well.